thank you very much for staying with us on DD India on this very, very special broadcast. Biden in White House as United States of America gears up for this much-awaited swearing-in ceremony to elect its 46th president amidst unprecedented security measures that are in place because the nation still seems to be a little rattled by January 6th Capitol Hill siege and also potential armed protests reportedly. Well, in the next 2 hours, me and Mark, we're going to get you the sense of mood out there. We'll be getting you live reportage as DD India correspondent Nick Harper is going to be joining us from the very epicenter of action and much more. I'm Sakal Bhatt.
Thanks, Sakal, and I'm Mark. And as Joe Biden, the U.S. President-elect, takes the stage for the inaugural address, he faces several unprecedented challenges. I mean, his focus is, in his own words, on restoring the soul of America, soul of the United States. So we will, on this special broadcast, what we're going to do is we're going to be joined by a highly distinguished panel of experts, and we're going to decode what it means for India and the rest of the world. But first, as always on DD India, the headlines come first.
The headlines at this hour.
As the final countdown for President-elect Joe Biden's oath-taking ceremony kicks in, Washington, D.C. turns into a fortress. Unprecedented security cover, around 25,000 National Guard troops keeping watch over the U.S. Capitol in the wake of the January 6th Capitol Hill siege.
And ahead of being sworn in as the United States of America's Vice President-elect, Kamala Harris outlines challenges ranging from pandemic to economic recession. She says healing and strengthening democracy will be the top priority. Adds that winning U.S. election was not the end but marked the beginning.
Sending a strong message, U.S. Vice President-elect Kamala Harris hails grassroots movements by all those people struggling in recession who deserve to be seen and heard. Adds it's time now for America for movements based not on fear but on unity.
Also, as America inches closer to transition of power, outgoing First Lady Melania Trump advises Americans violence is never the answer in her White House farewell speech, while Donald Trump remains elusive.
And stay tuned to our special broadcast, Biden in the White House, for incisive in-depth analysis and exclusive live ground reportage straight from Washington, D.C. as we build up to the Biden-Harris oath ceremony.
All right, so let's go straight across to Nick Harper, DD India correspondent, joining us live from Washington, D.C. And we are also joined by Meera Shankar, former Indian ambassador to United States of America. She's going to be with us in a bit. Dr. Harinder Sekho, consultant in strategic affairs experts, is with us on this broadcast. Professor W.P.S. Sidhu, Center for Global Affairs, New York University, is with us. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining us. Ma'am, thank you so very much. It's always a pleasure to have you both on the show. And Nick, coming to you first, Nick, over to you. How does this morning look out there in America today? What's the kind of build-up? Run us through the mood of America as we speak. And of course, good morning to you.
Good morning. Yes, I mean, the mood at the moment is certainly one of heightened security here in the nation's capital. Usually these inaugurations would be very dry, procedure, almost boring affairs. It would be a set standard of things that would take place during the course of Inauguration Day, including a parade, which will be massively scaled back this year, including a special luncheon and inauguration balls that simply won't happen. It is a very different situation this time round. The inauguration feeling and looking different. Many of those events will be scaled back. They were scaled back first because of COVID-19, then scaled back even further because of security concerns. And now, of course, we have much heightened security in place for this inauguration, about 2.5 times more secure than other inaugurations. 25,000 National Guard troops out on the streets, like the ones you can see behind me.
Indeed, as a build-up to Biden's inauguration, which is all set to take place on the 20th of January amid strict COVID protocols, unlike previous ones that drew massive crowds. This one is going to be a smaller affair, but it has drawn mammoth worldwide attention.
Absolutely.
This is for various reasons, also some firsts.
And as it has some first to its credit, given the risk from the pandemic that United States faces still, and also the potential threats reportedly in the light of the recent U.S. Capitol Hill siege that Nick also talked about, Biden's inauguration team has urged supporters to stay at home. So amidst all this build-up, viewers, take a look at some of the developments so far, the story so far, and amidst a rocky handover of power and in the midst of an alarming surge of COVID-19 cases in the US, here is what has happened so far. Trump, Biden, first of all, they sparred over the travel plan, the kind of reactions that are coming from both sides. Trump wanted to lift the ban, but Biden said there has to be a travel ban. Moving on, Trump lifted the travel ban on Europe and Brazil, but Team Biden strongly differs. Yes,
indeed,
Mark.
and Biden teams dismisses Trump's statement. There's going to be some sort of disagreements as this transition takes place, because as we know, the U.S. President Donald Trump is still living in denial, and Melania Trump has given a farewell speech, and in her statement she has spoken rather decently.
It's a very interesting statement coming in from Melania. We're going to play out this statement for our viewers very soon, but the crux is that violence is not the answer. But meanwhile,
Donald Trump has remained elusive.
Well, as of now, today, in the last 24 hours, we haven't really heard much of him. The last we heard of him was lift the ban, and after that, nothing. The fact that this is a low-key inauguration rehearsal, remember...
That's because of COVID,
absolutely.
No other real reasons.
Yes. So talking about Melania, her farewell statement was a very carefully worded farewell statement. We're going to go to Nick in a bit, but we're going to play out that Melania statement. I'm going to just quote a bit of it. She says that violence is never the answer. And she has also said that being the First Lady, in fact, Mark, is the greatest honor of her life. Mark.
Yes, the First Lady Melania Trump has said that being the First Lady has been a great honor for her. She's advised Americans that violence is never the answer. This was her White House farewell speech.
Yes, and she also goes on to say that this has been the greatest honor of her life to be the First Lady of the United States of America, and much more. And she's in fact paid tributes to the frontline workers amidst pandemic that's coming at this juncture.
Yes.
Tribute to the military. Let's listen.
Be passionate in everything you do, but always remember that violence is never the answer and will never be justified. As I say farewell to my role as First Lady, it is my sincere hope that every American will do their part to teach our children what it means to be best. In all circumstances, I ask every American to be an ambassador of Be Best, to focus on what unites us, to raise above what divides us, to always choose love over hatred, peace over violence, and others before yourself. Together, as one national family, we can continue to be the light of hope for future generations and carry on America's legacy of rising our nation to greater heights through our spirit of courage, goodness, and faith.
And we are also joined by Ambassador Meera Shankar, former Indian ambassador to the United States. So let's begin our discussion. Ambassador Meera Shankar, how would you look at this transition? There are, of course, several firsts, but it also comes at a time when there's a great deal of underlying discord that's quite palpable, actually. So would you see several challenges for the new administration once they take office?
Certainly, there will be challenges. I mean, this has been an unprecedented election and aftermath. You've had the unwillingness to accept the result of the election from the loser. You have had a siege or an assault on the Capitol, and in the wake of it, you've had stories about impending threats to the inaugural, leading to the deployment of forces in such heavy measure.
Yes.
And an inauguration which is going to be quite restrained and limited, of course, also because of the pandemic, not only for security reasons, but because of the pandemic. So clearly, Biden has enormous challenges ahead of him. The getting a handle on the corona epidemic, pandemic, and getting the vaccination rollout quickly, getting a handle on the economy and fostering an economic recovery which will generate employment, because there's high levels of unemployment, and healing race relations, which have been very fraught in the run-up to the election and in its aftermath, and healing the political divides in America, which have become so toxic, as we have seen in this election. So it's a fairly daunting challenge. Added
Certainly.
to this, globally, is the increasing assertion of China.
Okay.
We will, yes, ma'am. We will talk about how he's going to deal with China, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Russia, and so on and so forth, and what it really means for India out there. A little later. Meanwhile, ma'am, let me go across to Dr. Harinder Sikho. How do you decode the statements that have come, Dr. Sikho, so far, especially the latest from Kamala Harris, the Vice President-elect, where she categorically talks about restoring democracy. She talks about healing. Do you think they are now looking at breaking barriers, trying to bring everyone together, trying to say that leave the baggage behind, considering what we have seen, the kind of developments, political and otherwise, on ground in America post the elections? What do you think is their blueprint, and would you describe it as a peaceful transition of power?
We seem to have a little bit of a difficulty with Professor Sikho's.
Professor Sidhu, can you take this question, please, till we fix that audio of ma'am? Yes, Professor Sidhu.
Absolutely, happy to do that. Well, look, I think Donald Trump presidency, right from his inauguration, was the unusual one, where he really talked about a very dark image of the United States. He talked about American carnage, and he really presented himself as a divider-in-chief rather than a uniter-in-chief. And I think the very first thing that the Biden-Harris administration is going to do is to try to reverse that by saying that, in fact, the role of the executive and the president and vice president is to be the uniter-in-chief.
Yes.
So it's certainly going to be an effort in that direction to try and make sure how do you bring everybody together. But let's be clear, this is an incredibly divided country. It's a country where, on the one hand, even the outgoing president and who lost the election has garnered the largest number of votes that have ever been garnered by any Republican president in the history of the United States. So it's not a clear divide. It's a very deep divide. And it's going to be a big challenge for even the Biden-Harris administration to address that. But as Ambassador Shankar pointed out, this has been recognized, which is why Joe Biden already has identified as one of his top 4 priorities the need to address this racial divide.
Yes.
Okay. In fact, Nick Harper, we can bring you in here. Among the priorities, there are lots of things that are going to be reversed right at the start. One is the policy on climate change. The other is the policy on immigration. How is this being received and being looked at as perhaps, the direction with which the Biden administration is going to function?
Well, I don't think there's any great surprises in terms of what Joe Biden's laying out to do within his first few days in office. We knew that he wanted to reverse many of those policies that were put in place by Donald Trump. Those were things that he campaigned on in the run-up to this election. But yes, we know that within the first few hours of becoming president, in just a day's time, he will rejoin the Paris Climate Agreement. He will also lay out immigration reform, trying to give a path to citizenship for about the 11 million Americans who are living in the United States illegally, offering them an opportunity to become US citizens. Also laying out COVID plans, telling people that for the next 100 days he wants them to wear masks as much as possible, but also trying to lay the groundwork for ending the travel ban that was put in place by Donald Trump against several Muslim majority countries, and trying to put in place some of those COVID-19 economic recovery plans by extending some of those unemployment benefits and also extending the ability for people not to be evicted or foreclosed out of their houses. So lots of things that he will be doing really within those first few hours, and we are expecting over the first few days more announcements from him, executive orders that he's able to sign into law with his own presidential authority without needing Congress's approval.
But there are some concerns, Nick, about whether he can actually achieve a lot in terms of reversal, because what the U.S. president, the current president Donald Trump, had done is that he appointed 234 judges to various courts, and that has put in place institutional change, which will probably be difficult to overhaul in a sense. So do you see, there is some, as Professor Sidhu was talking about the deep divides within American society. Do you see this as one of the big areas, where people are concerned that the justice delivery system seems to be moving in one area?
Well, potentially, yes. I mean, that is certainly a legacy for Donald Trump that will remain for many years to come, those judges right across the country, as well as the fact that he was able to appoint 3 Supreme Court justices, people who serve for the rest of their lives, have the ability to really sway public opinion and put some very definite legislative stamps on the country, things that will be in place for many, many years to come. And yes, those are issues which come with very big divides. Things like abortion, things like gun rights, things like immigration, where the left and the right in the US are very divided on their opinions. Don't forget, 75 million people voted for Donald Trump. For Joe Biden, trying to win over even a small proportion of them will be a huge challenge during his time as president.
Yes. Nick, thank you so much. In fact, let me quickly go across to Professor Sikho, ma'am, if you could hear me now. Well, apologies for that bit of a snag out there. Please go ahead with your point, and also the challenges that we've been talking about, the transition of power, your response to that, considering you understand US polity so very good and deeply. Uphill task for Biden, but will he be able to win the confidence of the divided society of America, United States of America, considering capital siege and the other threats?
It's going to be a very tough thing, because United States at the moment is divided right across the middle.
Yeah.
Maximum number of votes have been cast in this election, and it has been a close call. And as W.P. Sidhu mentioned, that Donald Trump has got the highest number of votes any Republican presidential candidate has got in the US elections. So what we see is, going back to your earlier question about the healing, that is not something which Kamala Harris has said now. It was Joe Biden's election, during his electioneering also, he said that he is going to heal the soul of America.
Yes.
So that is something they were talking about. They were aware of the fact that it was a very divided United States. Race, Black Lives Matter, race had all become very combative issues in the United States over the last 4 years. So it is something which Biden and Kamala Harris are committed to. Democrats on the whole are viewed as being more liberal and have a more accommodating policy, and Biden knows that he inherits a very tough mantle. But how effective this is going to be, because they're expecting trouble. There's an FBI notification that there may be riots in all the 50 state capitals. And also you have, the core Trump support group, the 40% core Americans who voted for him on 2 elections, 2016 and 2020. They will feel that they are losing ground, and they would want to fight for to retain their privileges. So it is going to be very difficult. And Biden has himself said that he inherits a very tough challenge. And I think the COVID-19 has not simplified things. So it's going to be a lot of issues to tackle for Joe Biden and the new administration.
Right.
So then let's move on to our next story, and then perhaps that'll give us some more focus. what are the areas that Team Biden and Harris are going to accord top priority to? When Joe Biden, the president-elect of America, formally announced his entry into the 2020 presidential election, Joe Biden declared that he stood for two things: workers who built the country of America, and values that can bridge divisions. So Biden has promised to build back better by taking bold action on all four priorities simultaneously, including making unprecedented investments in healthcare, infrastructure, and clean energy.
Absolutely, Mark. And as US faces these challenges from pandemic to racial inequity, his pitch is to create this new economic opportunities template for workforce, also restoring environmental protections. Climate change is top of the agenda. We know that healthcare rights, international alliances, so much on his platter. So basically, his final countdown for Biden to be sworn into office in the midst of four deeply intertwined crises. We're talking about the health crisis, the economic, the racial injustice, and the climate crisis. Let's take a look at the top priorities.
From the Democratic National Convention in August to the final days of the race in November, you were there to support the President-elect Joe Biden and me as we fought to restore the soul of our nation. Of course, that doesn't mean the road ahead is going to be easy, but we are ready to get to work. Winning this election was not the end of our work. In many important ways, it was just the beginning.
The 46th President of the United States of America takes office in unprecedented times. The COVID-19 pandemic that has killed nearly 4 lakh people in the country, the economic slowdown as a result of the pandemic, and most importantly, the divisive legacy that Donald Trump leaves behind for him. The insurrection on the 6th of January came as salt in the wounds of an already divided country. President-elect Joe Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris will face a daunting array of issues when they're sworn into office on Wednesday. So what exactly will their priorities be? Tackling COVID-19 clearly tops the list. It includes a plan for the effective, equitable distribution of treatments and vaccines, because development isn't enough if they aren't effectively distributed. Making masks compulsory in federal buildings is another action point to be enforced on day one of office. Next on the agenda is economic recovery.
A two-step plan of rescue and recovery. We will finish the job of getting a total of $2,000 in cash relief to people who need it the most. We'll also provide more peace of mind for struggling families by extending unemployment insurance beyond the end of March for millions of workers.
Third on the list is racial equity. As stated on the Build Back Better website that outlines Biden-Harris priorities, it says the moment has come for our nation to deal with systemic racism, to deal with the growing economic inequality in our nation. Racial equity is a distinct pillar of the Build Back Better plan. President-elect Biden is removing barriers to participation in our economy, expanding access to opportunity, and fully enforcing the policies and laws that we already have on the books. And finally, climate change, an issue that saw the US isolated in the global community under the Trump administration.
Every person in our great country has the right to clean air, clean water, and a healthier life, no matter how much money they have in their pockets, the color of their skin, or the community that they live in. We will move with a sense of urgency on climate change.
Clearly, the Biden-Harris team have their plate full. They plan to hit the ground running, rejoining the Climate Action Accord on day one of office, and bringing the COVID-hit country back from the brink on the health and economy fronts. Bureau Report, DD India.
Ambassador Meera Shankar, we talked about the challenges, but Joe Biden brings to the table a huge amount of experience. I mean, probably the most experienced person to take office within the system. I mean, he's worked with the system for 50 years almost, and he probably understands everything about it. So there's no better man in that sense, a person who brings that kind of experience and has ability to work with both parties and everyone across the aisle to take things forward. What would you say?
Yes, I would agree with that, because he's long years of experience in the Senate and later as vice president. And his reputation in the Senate in particular was of someone who could reach across the aisle to craft a bipartisan consensus. So his effort is really going to be to, as he said, govern not only for those who voted for him, but also for those who did not vote for him. And if we look at the genesis of this huge divide, it has partly to do with anxieties about demographic changes amongst white voters, particularly those who are uneducated and not so skilled. I mean, not uneducated, but not university educated and not so skilled. Secondly, it has to do with growing economic disparities in the US, where the top 1% have seen their fortunes grow and grow, while the bottom has continued to do worse than it did before. So income inequalities, social stratification, and if some of these issues are addressed, particularly the economic anxieties which have been visible in a section of Americans suffering the adverse impact of globalization through loss of jobs or depression in incomes. I think if some of those measures work, it might take the edge off some of these divisions, but it's too early to say, and it's not going to be easy.
Easy, absolutely.
On healthcare, Biden has, wants to provide healthcare to all and also tweak Obamacare to improve it. He will go for insurance options rather than a public option for expanding healthcare. On climate change, he will rejoin the Paris Accord and also wants more ambition, in the objectives that people, or goals that people have outlined, countries have outlined for themselves. And he himself would like to be net carbon neutral by 2050 and have a net carbon neutral energy sector much earlier, I think almost by 2030 or 2035. And again, a net carbon neutral transportation sector, a mass transport in most urban cities. So he's laying out very clear goals.
Yes, ma'am.
But he also sees this whole green initiative where he's going to invest some of his funds.
So he already has. Yes. Sorry, ma'am. I'm interrupting you here because we have to go to Dr. Harinder Sekhwar. We'll come to you as well in a bit. But he already has that climate change army in place. Like, there are a lot of speculations about Team Biden till it gets really, really official with the 20 plus Indian Americans being part of that. But Professor Sekhwar, I want to ask you, Dr. Sekhwar, I want to ask you this one. We are talking about economic reconstruction, and we are talking about bridging the trust deficit when it comes to overcoming recession consequences. He has already made an announcement of economic rescue package to the tune of 1.9 trillion. Is that enough? It looks good on paper. Will Joe Biden be able to actually tame those who have been vociferously supporting Donald Trump, and they continue to do so?
He is left with no choice but to try. I think it's a very handsome amount, the stimulus package which he has announced, because the US has, the economy has taken a terrible hit. Joblessness, infrastructure development, all of them have been severely impacted by the COVID. So he knows that the economic challenge is the most serious challenge, and if he can set the pace for economic recovery, it is not going to happen in a day. It will take time, and whether 4 years is enough, you will start seeing the results in about 2 years. The measures which are taken today will take at least 2 years to take effect. But he has also promised $2,000 into the bank accounts of the needy. And I think if he can implement or start the implementation process of the social reforms which he has pledged, revive Obamacare in a tweaked form. So if that can impact the lives of the people where it matters, I think America would do well. And
Right.
he, in any case, has adopted a softer approach to reach across people. And he has said that he is going to be the president for America, for all Americans. So the messaging is very positive. There will be people who would try to thwart the administration, throw challenges to the administration, which is something which one faces in any democracy. So I think it may not seem enough right now, but the measures are there, and he brings over 50 years of experience with him. So he knows, and he knows that what is required for America.
Okay.
So, I mean, you can't have a more experienced person, and I think the two of them bridge a lot of, cover a lot of ground between him and Kamala Harris. They cover a lot of ground. And
Yes.
also, if you see the people they have picked, the cabinet pick, this is all people of experience and old trusted Biden loyalists.
Yes.
So he has picked each one on
Yes,
merit.
Dr. Sikko. Let's bring in Professor Sidhu. You know, the concept of turning division into unity, it sounds very deep and philosophical, but you know, key to that is going to be police reforms, because if we look at the Black Lives Matter movement, it's really asking for that, isn't it? At the end of the day, to see that police are not going to be using such harsh means and targeting only one side. How do you think this is going to be achieved?
With a lot of difficulty is the short answer. But I just want to address, you know, another question your colleague asked, whether this is in fact going to be a peaceful transition
Yes.
of power. And barely so, because, you know, you have today 25,000 National Guard actually protecting Washington, D.C. for the purposes of this ceremony. That, just to put this into context, is more than all the American troops presently based outside in other parts of the world, including Afghanistan, Iraq, and even Syria. So just tells you that it is a peaceful transition, but barely so. I think you're absolutely right. You know, President-elect and to-be President Biden has an incredibly ambitious agenda, which goes very much including the police reforms that he called out as soon as the insurrection which happened on the 6th of January at the Capitol, to say that the approach of the law enforcement to a predominantly white crowd was very, very different than that towards a Black Lives Matter. He does make a distinction in not wanting to defund the police, but to reform them. And there's a lot of aspects that he needs to do, including, by the way, to deal with his own ghosts, because he was one of the architects in the past of this kind of aggressive policing that we have now come to see today. And so he will really have to deal with that and go back. It's going to be challenging, partly because the police unions are also very concerned about that. But, you know, it is on a day when India has probably pulled off the most ambitious, you know, win in the history of cricket against Australia.
Yes.
I think we should celebrate the kind of ambitious agenda that even President-elect Biden has.
Right.
Great to hear that people are following cricket in America.
Absolutely. And well, India is going to be one of Biden's best friends. And how is he going to forge this relationship? We are going to talk about that as well with our distinguished panel. But before that, since we are talking about priorities, we are talking about an economic package stimulus, President-elect Joe Biden's first days in office will be dominated by this crisis, as also commented by our experts. The coronavirus pandemic in economic emergency it actually caused, as well as the fallout from the Capitol Hill riot that we saw some days back, Mark.
And for this, President-elect Joe Biden is promoting a $1.9 trillion economic package.
Huge.
It's a huge package. It's to be a country, it's for this country that's battered by the year-long pandemic that we have seen has killed over 400,000 Americans, and it has also sickened tens of millions, which is before he takes office with week. Let's take a look at this proposal. And for
Right.
that, in fact, Munmun Bhattacharya,
yes.
our
This
colleague, is standing by.
Absolutely. This proposal marks a very aggressive start as far as its priorities are concerned. And what exactly is this economic stimulus, and what does this really finally decode? We try to decode this, and our colleague Munmun Bhattacharya joins us with our news bit with a very detailed explainer. Munmun, good evening. Over to you.
Thanks, Sakal, as well as Mark. So let's take a look at the key elements of what is being called the American Rescue Plan put forth by the Biden team. It is a $1.9 trillion economic rescue package. This is the American Rescue Plan's valuation, financial relief for Americans suffering from the aftermath of the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic. So this is a very important element of the economic stimulus plan, if I may say. Plan calls for topping up $600 payments in a $900 billion coronavirus relief bill of December. So that bill that you just saw of December was passed by both houses of the US Congress, but now this is going to be further relief. Increase in a current extra weekly benefit to the unemployed from $300 to $400. So there is going to be an increase per person by around $100. Extension for key unemployment programs from mid-March to end of September. So key unemployment programs thus get now a 6-month extension from mid-March to mid-September. Besides that, increasing federal minimum wage to $15 an hour over time. So this is something that is going to happen in the long term as per the plan. Over $1 trillion in direct aid to individuals and families. These are further components of the package that Joe Biden has unveiled. This is the kind of amount that is going to go in direct aid to individuals and families. This is actually a valuation of the $2,000 for every eligible beneficiary for the whole of America. $415 billion focused on combating COVID-19 pandemic. So there is a two-pronged focus of the stimulus package. One is to combat the COVID-19 pandemic, and the second one is to revive a fledgling economy. $20 billion for a national vaccination program. Remember, the emphasis of Joe Biden has been to inoculate 100 million people with COVID-19 vaccines in the first 100 days of his administration. $50 billion to scale up coronavirus testing. So he has spoken about the need for more testing centers and the need for more skilled personnel to be able to do that testing. $170 billion to be directed toward reopening schools. So this is the plan of Joe Biden. Here in India, we've seen how schools have reopened. In America also, Biden hopes that there will be reopening of schools sooner than later. $440 billion in assistance to businesses. So this is going to go in particularly for small businesses. That's where this is directed. Employers have shared 140,000 jobs, especially low-income positions, in December 2020. And that is the reason why the need for the economic stimulus package is there today more than ever before. When will Biden's rescue plan be approved? That is the big question, because he's unveiled it, but the question is, when will it get the approval of the US Congress? Some members of Democratic Party are saying that $1,400 top-up is not enough. So even within the Democratic Party, there are divisions. Some believe that what has already been planned is enough. Some believe that that is not enough. Any bill based on Biden's plan will have to be passed in the House first. So the bill will need to be first passed in the House of Representatives before it goes to the Senate. You would remember that in the House of Representatives, there is a slim majority that the Democrats enjoy, and it's going to be a 50-50 Senate as far as the strength of Republicans and Democrats go. Package may be passed as one big package or broken into smaller pieces. Now, this is an option that will be there before the Biden administration on whether they want to pass the entire bill in one go, whether they want to break it in different parts, considering that opinion is divided within the Democratic Party and also within the Republican Party on the various elements of this bill. Especially fiscally conservative lawmakers are of the opinion that the kind of spending that this involves, $1.9 trillion, and takes the entire economic stimulus package so far in the whole of the pandemic to well above $5 trillion is far too much, and ultimately the taxpayer will have to foot the bill. On some parts of the proposal, both Democrats and Republicans can agree. So there are certain parts that people or lawmakers from both parties, Democratic Party as well as the Republican Party, agree, but there are many other parts. On other parts of the proposal, there can be strong opposition. We are already seeing that play out. there are differing voices within the Republican Party and within the Democratic Party. Interestingly, Donald Trump and Joe Biden are on the same page as far as the $2,000 payout to various individuals in America is concerned, because earlier the bill that was passed was worth $600. Now a top-up of $1,400 taking place. So that takes the overall amount to $2,000. So that's it from me then. Sakal and Mark, it's back to you.
Yes, so basically they agree on some and they differ on other. We're going to discuss that with our panelists also, but before that, let's just try and get the latest what's happening on ground there. Washington, D.C., our colleague Nick Harper continues to be with us live from there. Nick, as we speak, we understand that the approval process of the secretaries, that very, very crucial meeting is currently on. What more are you picking up on that?
That's right, yeah. 5 cabinet positions are in front of committee hearings during the course of the day. Some very significant positions there, including Secretary of State and Secretary of the Treasury. Really the top cabinet picks that Joe Biden is hoping to be able to have on his cabinet. But of course they need to go through an approval process on Capitol Hill. This is the first part of it where they will face questions as part of that committee hearing. The end result is that they would need to be approved by the Senate. And of course he would hope to get all of the people that he has nominated approved. But there is always the possibility that they will face not just tough questions, but potential no votes from Republicans. But he is hoping to be able to push things forward, and that's why we're already seeing this process underway, and it will continue for some weeks. Of course, that is partly why there is some complications and some questions about when that Senate trial, the impeachment of Donald Trump, the second one, will take place, because Joe Biden is likely to want to try and push through those cabinet members first.
All right, Nick, a little bit more. What are you picking up from people, by and large, especially who were not, who actually voted for Donald Trump, and in the wake of what we have seen in the last few weeks, has there been a final sort of acceptance for Joe Biden? I'm talking about the anti-faction, because now they're left with no choice. He is the president-elect of America, and after 24 hours is going to be the United States of America's president.
Well, absolutely. I mean, this is what would happen after any election. There would be millions of people who have seen the person that they voted for lose the election. But I don't feel that there has been any acceptance. I think what we saw on January the 6th, a week and a half ago, with those violent protests, those pro-Trump supporters then storming Congress, rioting right through the halls of Capitol Hill, suggests that that acceptance level is still very, very low. Of the 75 million people who voted for Donald Trump, there may be some who are beginning to accept the reality, but there is certainly a considerable faction who quite simply feel that the election was stolen from them. And of course that is the message that their president, Donald Trump, pushed during his last couple of months in office. This, of course, is his final full day in office, but since that November 3rd election, his message was very much one that the election had been stolen from him, and that is why we continue to see those lawsuits that he was pushing through courts right across the United States, including the Supreme Court.
Yes, and we can see White House right behind you, Nick. Before we leave you, very quickly, there is this unprecedented security cover. The number of troops spread across Washington, D.C., particularly behind you. We can also see a very robust security presence. So the administration is leaving no stone unturned to ensure that there is no repetition of Capitol siege. But just give us a quick sense. What do you sense on ground?
Yeah, I mean, it is certainly a much tenser situation. I haven't seen security at this level at any of the big presidential events that I've covered in recent years. It really is unprecedented. They say that it's 2.5 times stronger in terms of the security presence out on the streets. 25,000 National Guard troops expected out during the course of tomorrow, which is a huge number. The National Mall, where tens of thousands of members of the public would normally watch the event, that of course has been completely closed, and a state of emergency is in place. It has been for the last week or so and will continue until about midday on Thursday. These troops, behind me are part of that National Guard contingent, but they're also being backed up by Capitol Hill police officers, by FBI, by the Secret Service. It very much has that citadel feeling to it. A fortress has been built with all of these roadblocks and road closures right across this whole downtown area, with all the streets running up to the Capitol building just behind me.
Yes, that's Capitol Hill building just behind you, and that's going to be the very epicenter of action.
Right.
Nick, stay with us. We will be coming to you in a bit.
Ambassador Meera Shankar, you know, with regard to the economic package, I think basically what people will be looking at is to get jobs back, and that will bring the economy back on track. And President-elect Joe Biden seems to have come up with a unique idea, which is that to use the pandemic and hire people to fight the pandemic, and that will create jobs. He's called that. You know, it's called the Public Health Jobs Corps, something. That's what he's planning to create, which will create a number of jobs. How do you look at this policy, and how they could utilize the pandemic to try and build back the economy? Ambassador Shankar, did you hear me?
Yes. Well, I think certainly he's looking both to his action plan for the pandemic to generate jobs and some economic revival, along with getting the pandemic under control. The second element that he's looking at is this whole green stimulus and building of infrastructure, apart from the direct relief and the pandemic action plan. The third element is this whole action plan on climate change and this green stimulus, which again he hopes will help America to generate new jobs, as well as provided the technology edge for new technologies, which will reassert its economic dominance in the future. So I think it's got three elements. One is direct cash relief, and relief in terms of unemployment insurance and, you know, waiver of evictions, extension of student loan repayments, and so on. And the second is the action plan on COVID, which will get money, and the rollout of the vaccination plan, the generation of these volunteer jobs for that. And then the third element is this infrastructure and
pretty much
green technologies, which is going to be part of his broader stimulus.
Professor Sidhu, so in terms of creating jobs, there seems to be some sort of a Keynesian model involved here, that the government is putting in huge investments into refurbishing infrastructure to make it sustainable, you know, clean energy focus, overhauling infrastructure, creating new jobs in the auto sector so that they are energy efficient cars. So all this is basically the government is going to be putting in this kind of investment. Is that what the plan is? Or because the US is a capitalist economy where, you know, the private sector invests to a large extent?
That's a question. And I think what the Biden plan intends to do is to change the narrative really on climate change, to say that, look, you know, this can be changed from a threat into an opportunity for the United States to lead in all kinds of alternatives to the fossil fuel industries, which in any case were dying out even under President Trump. So, you know, coal mines were not being revived beyond a point, etc. And Joe Biden knows this because he's from Pennsylvania, and he recognizes, or in the neighborhood of there, and he recognizes that there is an opportunity to make more money, which is what the United States understands and the private sector understands. Very few people are aware that one of the states which has invested the largest in renewable energy is Texas, which is normally seen to be associated with fossil fuel, oil, etc., because they've seen the writing on the wall. So all the Biden plan is trying to do is to say, folks, there's an opportunity to make money here. We are going to make the laws to make that possible. but we very much want the entrepreneurs also to take the lead on this and try and promote that as far as possible. And which is why his appointment of John Kerry is absolutely instrumental, because that is the message that Kerry is bringing forward. Join this to make money.
Fine. Dr. Sikko, how would you look at, the choice of Janet Yellen as the Treasury Secretary? She has been the Federal Reserve chairperson and, a respected economist in that respect. What do you think? I mean, how would you see this playing out in terms of sending signals? Because such a lot of the economy is dependent on sentiment.
She brings a lot of experience, and she's held an important post during the Obama administration. And she's the one who had set the rate, for the Treasury. She was seen as a very positive, stable influence on the economy, and during Obama's time for the economic recovery, which happened in the post-2008 period. So I think she brings a lot of experience, and she'll probably, I think that's the reason Biden has chosen somebody with experience, somebody he can trust, because I think the economic challenge to the United States is the maximum at this time. Because of their overseas commitments and also domestically. And she is going to, I think the focus is going to be more on reviving the domestic economic agenda. Any US president who is elected, the first 2 years traditionally go in inward looking. I think this is an administration which is going to look more inwards in trying to set things right within the country and how to help America regain its lost place by first strengthening itself at home.
Right. Thanks very much, Dr. Harinder Sikko, Professor W.P.S. Sidhu, and Meera Shankar for joining us for this hour on our continued coverage of Biden in the White House. We're going to be taking a short break now, and when we return, we'll have a new panel of experts, and we'll continue with our our
special broadcast, Biden in White House. On the other side of the short break, let's also tell who all are joining us. A very, very distinguished panel continues to be with us. Ambassador Dr. Mohan Kumar, former diplomat and chairman RIS for developing countries. We also will be joined by Dr. Ajay Mathur, DG Terry, because he's going to throw some more light as far as the Biden's ambitious climate change action plan is concerned. And also, Nick Harper continues to be with us from Washington, D.C., the epicenter of action. On the other side, don't go away. We'll be back.